Welcome to episode 20 of Sweet Nation. We have a returning guest, as you might recognize from episode 6, Big Mike Fordham from Flint Central High School and the University of Illinois Fighting Illini.
What's up, Mike?
What's going on, fellas? How we doing?
Good, good. We missed you.
Man, it's a little chilly out. I mean, it looks like it's nice outside, but I'm cold, man. How's the weather where you guys are at?
Hey, it's Michigan, so right now it's sunny, but I'll let you know in 5 minutes what's the change.
And I already told you guys it's 80, nice 84, light breeze, sunny out. I don't want you guys to get too jealous now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Well, today we're going to do a wrestling podcast, particularly about Jerome Young, aka New Jack. Highly controversial, known for his hardcore, by any means necessary tactics in the ring. I've been a fan of his probably since like 94, 95. And I used to like read wrestling magazines back then because we didn't have the technology that we do now. And I used to read all this stuff about him. So I'm kind of like, I guess you would say the New Jack expert of the three. But Dan and Mike are pretty intrigued about New Jack, and I'm interested to hear what they say about him. And I'll add a few things, and I'll kind of just be here for like clarification type purposes. And we're going to talk about, for the most part, Jerome Young, and then maybe the last 5 or 10 minutes we might throw some old school wrestling references in there because Mike is a big wrestling fan.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
And I'm a wrestling fan too, but I'm more of a mainstream wrestling fan. I watched WWE and WCW back in the day, and I was a big fan, especially in the Attitude Era. But until I didn't know about New Jack. I think I heard his name from you guys before, but Ray, you pointed me to the show that's on Vice right now, Dark Side of the Ring, and you said, "Hey, you got to go watch this episode." And I said, "All right." And man, I watched that episode and I immediately called Ray and I said, "We have to do a show about this guy. We got to get Mike on the show, and we got to talk about New Jack." I just thought it was such an interesting story that we had to talk about it. I've seen a couple of other episodes on Dark Side of the Ring. This one, I think, is one of the most, if not the most intriguing story they could tell. And it was just something that we had to do. New Jack, a.k.a. Jerome Young.
yeah,
And just how he took extreme wrestling to a whole nother level.
First time you heard his name, Dan, was it was the day I did the solo cast in the barber chair where you interviewed me.
Yeah.
And then at the end, you wanted me to do a fantasy tag team. Give me your 2 best good guys against your 2 best bad guys. And I said, I'm going to surprise you with one of my bad guys. You probably never heard of him. And I said, I want you to look him up and look at his history. That's when you heard New Jack's name for the first time.
Yeah. Yep. So I know what I learned about New Jack. You guys probably know, New Jack, a.k.a. like we said, Jerome Young. The dude used to be a bounty hunter, I guess. And
what he says. That's what he says.
Yeah, that's what he says. And I think
bounty hunter.
I think it was Jim Cornette on there that said, I think he's got a couple justifiable homicides on his record. And I was like, what do you mean justifiable homicides? Who is this guy? I assumed it was from his bounty hunter background, but yeah, really intriguing guy. Got his start in the Smoky Mountain Wrestling Federation.
Yeah.
Trained by a guy named Ray Candy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And got his name and kind of his persona from a combination influence of the movie New Jack City, starring Wesley Snipes, and West Coast gangster rap, specifically NWA. So, New Jack had a very rough childhood, to say the least.
Mm-hmm.
His father was an abusive alcoholic. There was incidents where he, stabbed his mother 5 times.
Yeah.
In the documentary, it says he shot his mother in the leg one time just coming home and getting pissed off. And his father died when he was the age of 5. So he took this violent childhood that he had and kind of put the New Jack City / NWA persona over top of it. And that's how he came up with his character. And at the time in the Smoky Mountain Wrestling Federation, you know, the N word was thrown around a lot. So he said, how can I piss all these white people off? And he became New Jack, you know. He was paired with a guy named Mustafa, right? And they created this tag team called the Gangstas, which was later joined by D'Lo Brown, who many know from the WWE.
Yep.
Yeah, man. What do you guys remember from New Jack and the Gangstas?
What do you think, Mike? What do you know about New Jack?
Hey, like you say, you know, when you mentioned it to me, I had to go ahead and do my little studies on him. I have a whole lot about New Jack, and the thing about it is, a lot of it ain't even about New Jack, because after you really break down, you know, just wrestling, WWE, what it represents, it's basically a microcosm of society. So you have this young man who, excuse me, was doing his thing, successful, whatever, bounty hunting or just beating people up around the hood. And the thing about it is, capitalism will find you. And that's what happened with New Jack. Because I'm going to tell you right now, this is why I got the hat on. You know how many New Jacks it is walking around Flint right now? I mean, legitimate. You know, we got Clarissa Shields. You know what I'm saying? This is Flint. So as I'm watching them, you know, yeah, I can understand the shock value and this, that, and the other. But yet and still, Ray, you know, me and you both know, and Dan too, you know, with we go back to Dusty Rhodes, Road Warriors. You know, Road Warriors will pull them spikes out the shoulder pads at any moment. You know, Hacksaw Jim Duggan will come in with the 2x4 and let you have it at any moment. Jake the Snake will throw the python on you and let him tense up on you at any moment. So understand, New Jack ain't doing nothing new. He's not doing anything new. And that's why, you know, we probably get back to this a little bit later, but you know how you was just mentioning that he'll be on one of your bad guy teams, you know, against, you know, your favorite good guys. Let me tell you, I hope this pissed you off.
Uh-oh.
Let me tell you how I compared New Jack to the NBA. New Jack would be like a Steph Curry. Okay? New, doing different things, certain things people can't do, but he'll never be called the greatest. He'll never be a LeBron, never be a Michael, and that's Jordan, not me, but, you know, I got a jumper too. But he'll never be listed in that top of great wrestlers. Yeah, he does, you know, I seen when he threw my man off the scaffolding, what was that, 20 feet in the air, and talking about, yeah, he wanted to kill him.
40 feet, yeah.
Yeah, and now we selling tickets. You know what I'm saying? Because you
remember he teased him up there.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
And then like when you go back to the Dark Side of the Ring episode, who was that? Paul Heyman.
Yep.
Yeah, Paulie.
He was the orchestrator. He wrote out their stuff. So wrestling management ain't crazy. They see what they got in New Jack and what he's stirring up in the fans, and that's what sells tickets. People, that's what people want to do. Like how Hutch was talking about earlier. This gives everybody what they want, and it's technically okay because, like, you know, he had his little run-ins with the law, but like back when he was in the Smoky Mountain Conference, you know, the N-word was just thrown around, you know, and that's what he used to kind of push himself and, you know, get a little bit more upset or whatever. But that was the release. It was the release for him. It was the release for the fans. It was the release for the people in upper management where, okay, again, like I said earlier, going back to the microcosm of society, now he's in a situation where he's allowing people to be able to do things that they don't necessarily are able to do within normal society, just like him. So it's like everybody is in on the game. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So
I took that away from the documentary too. They don't talk about in the documentary about his wrestling abilities much. I'm not saying he wasn't a good wrestler, I mean, but he was known for his extreme behavior in the ring, his extreme tactics. You know, the folding chairs, the tables, the barbed wire bats, the hidden razor blades, and stuff like that. So, and I think if you asked him, he'd probably be okay with that. He's like, I don't want to be considered the greatest wrestler in the world. He doesn't have the wrestling technique of like a Paul Orndorff, but that's not what he wants to be known for. You know what I mean? I was talking to somebody today that had no idea who New Jack was, and didn't even know anything about extreme wrestling. And I told her about the ECW and what kind of wrestling it was, and she's like, her eyes got real big, and she's like, how is that? Is that a thing? Like, is that even allowed? Like, how is that even allowed? And I was like, yes, back then it was like a huge calling for it, because they had to compete with the WWE and the WWF and WCW. It was their way of drawing some attention away from them. And later in the mid to late 90s, it got even more popular.
Right.
It made its way into those major wrestling foundations.
Yeah. I agree with Mike when he said that, they'll really never view him as one of the all-time great wrestlers. But I will say, based on like my research over the years on New Jack, that I wouldn't have known, let's say 20 years ago with technology now, I think that like when we think of him cutting mass transit, we think all that gruesome stuff, and we think of how he grew up and all that, but a lot of things that get overlooked about him is he was a decent wrestler. Like Mike said, he wasn't Paul Orndorff, Bob Orton, or Bret Hart, but he actually can wrestle a little bit. And I thought that he was every bit from like an aerial standpoint, like jumping off turnbuckles and jumping off the second decks of arenas. I thought he was every bit as athletic as Superfly Snuka, because when you're 30 feet in the air and you got a guy way down there placed on a table, you have to be spot on. I mean, because that's like a game of inches. I mean, he could have been seriously injured with all those jumps that he had. And when you look at that, the mass transit incident where he jumped off the turnbuckle with the chair and hit him with the chair,
yep.
He is way up in the air and comes down perfectly. The guy was, I won't say he was a great athlete, but he had great hand-eye coordination, okay? If there is such a difference. He had good hand-eye coordination. And another thing that I've learned about him, now that I've started following him on social media, he's really not as bad of a person as people thinks that he is, because sometimes he does talk to his fans, very appreciative of us. Mm-hmm. Through the COVID-19, he's constantly telling us to stay safe, and he preaches social distancing all the time. The guy really does have a heart. So there's two sides of Jerome Young, and a lot of his good qualities we really don't see a whole lot of.
Yeah,
I've never seen, like back in the day when they was pulling them spikes out and stuff. It was never a question about, do we got to go to the courthouse now? You know what I'm saying? Everybody understood, hey, this part of the show. And for that to even go to court, when we coming in here on false pretenses, knowing that the young man said that he was only 17, I said that he was 21 when he was 17. And the thing about it is, everybody signs the waivers, especially if you're about to go against New Jack. Because my thing is, if you're going against Andre the Giant, you about to get slammed.
Yeah.
If you're going against Hulk Hogan, that leg drop.
Yeah.
So if you decide you're going against New Jack, come on, man. You up for any and everything. And the thing about it is, barbed wire was not used the first time when New Jack used it. Scaffolding jumps was not used by New Jack first. Everything New Jack did at some point had been done before. Because like he was talking about when they broke it down in that episode, how they would wrap up the blades and different things.
Yep.
That's been the whole thing.
That's nothing new. Yeah, and to add to your point about mimicking society, Mike, some of the big takeaways or the major incidents that I took away from that documentary that they detail was like, New Jack one time went to a Walmart and bought a little white baby doll, You know, when he was in some hick town and bought a baby doll and put it on a noose and carried it into the ring and just was swinging it around. The gangsters mimicked the Rodney King beating. You know, when that was taking place, they decided they were going to go in the ring and they were going to mimic the Rodney King beating, but they were going to reverse the roles, and they beat on a guy named Ricky Morton.
Yeah, the rock and roll. Ricky Morton.
Yep, the four of them with batons, and so they took that persona and flipped the script and mimicked that in the ring. You know, and these guys are so extreme, and so they took it to such a level that the Smoky Mountain Wrestling Federation had to put disclaimers on the screen when they did their promos saying, you know, the views of the gangsters do not reflect the views of the Smoky Mountain Wrestling Federation. You know what I mean?
That sells tickets.
Yeah.
Especially y'all remember back in the day when we had the clicker when you wanted to turn the channel to the new box after you got the Cinemax and HBO channels.
Yep.
And when you turn, especially after you knew the parents was in the bed, and they say, "Oh, this is gonna be rated R."
Yeah.
Only for mature audiences. Ray didn't go to bed. He sat his bad self right there in front of the TV.
Hell yeah,
and watched all that.
Yeah.
So
you know,
a disclaimer like that's selling tickets. You know, so they were marketing what they knew he was going to do. You know, all along.
Exactly.
Yeah. I want to put in perspective on how hated and how much heat that this guy really did have. Now, when he was a part of the Smoky Mountain Wrestling Organization out there in East Tennessee, okay? Now, I heard this before, and you guys got to remember, I work down south, so I'm in East Tennessee a lot. There are 0 black people out there in East Tennessee. You know that.
A lot of hills.
Like when Dan touched upon when Jim Cornette encouraged him to piss white people off, you know, like beating the hell out of Ricky Morton with the nightsticks, hanging that little white kid with the noose. Now, he also wanted New Jack to piss off black people because he didn't want him to start, or fans were going to start liking him, or for him to turn into a face. So what he ended up saying, and Mike, may I repeat what New Jack said?
Absolutely, go for it. You got my permission.
Okay. I had to ask because I'm not going to repeat it if you didn't want me to.
You darn there with us anyway, so.
He, I don't feel that way about, I like all flavors. But he, when it was his turn to piss black people off, when Dan mentioned the disclaimer where it said, we don't agree, that was the NAACP that filed a complaint against New Jack. And in that same interview, New Jack said, I don't give a fuck what them yard monkeys at NAACP, none of them niggas pay my bill. I don't give a fuck about them too. Fuck Martin Luther King and all that. He actually said that too. Now black people hate him now. And now never in my life,
black people,
out of all the sports that I ever watched, I've never seen an athlete so hated. Now you got to remember, I grew up like around the Bill Laimbeer era, Bob Lambert era, and Floyd Mayweather's from my home state. Mm-hmm. They are not nearly at his level when it comes to hate. Those in Johnson City, Tennessee, Columbia, Tennessee, Athens, Tennessee, they legitimately hated this guy, and they literally wanted to kill New Jack. And especially when he did the interview in the center of the ring with Jim Ross, where he had the black jacket on, had the hat on backwards, he told them fans, "You could kiss my black ass." Oh my God, I don't know how he got out of there alive.
You remember what Ray Candia told him?
What's that?
To create something that has never been seen before.
Yes.
When he came to him, because I think that was his, like, I don't want to call him his mentor, but when he was getting started or whatnot, he was one of the guys that he went to, and that was what he said. That was one of the first things he told him as he was developing New Jack.
Yep, exactly right. I didn't write that down, but that was a key note from that documentary. Is Ray Candy told him, create something nobody's ever seen before.
Yep. And then you could judge them by the reactions if you're doing it right. And I want to go back to your point too, Ray, about how he addressed black people. See, what I'm gonna tell you, what you're doing now is this story is getting way bigger than just New Jack, because when you bring that in, now you got to bring in the historical line, dividing line that has been drawn between the African American culture.
Yeah.
So now you're thinking about how your house black people back on the plantation responsible for snitching and this, that, and the other. Then you got your field people.
Right.
Okay. So it's historically has been that divide. So when he goes and says them people from the NAACP, you know, this, that, and the other, he just made 600,000 more fans in the African American community for people who feel that same way. So he didn't do anything in his career, I think, to hurt his popularity or his overall goal. Because if you brought in as a heel, that's your number one goal is to piss people off.
Yeah, and while that persona would have never played in the WWE or WWF, I think you guys would agree it's probably one of the most perfect personas ever created, because he had no fans, right? He had that Howard Stern effect, right? If you loved him, you were going to watch him, and if you hated him, you were going to watch him even more.
Yes.
Right. So he could not lose,
which then made you pull for the person that you cheering for that much more. So when now we get that opportunity to finally do get a win against New Jack, oh my goodness, you might as well just been elected president of the United States. As hated as he was, you beat New Jack. Oh shoot, man, that's what everybody wanted to see. So he did what he was supposed to do. Got to get the people what they want.
Yeah, and it's especially, which we'll get into later, the mass transit incident. You know, after that, I'm sure people's like, well, when's going to be the next mass transit incident, or when's going to be the next incident like that, or what's he going to do next? You know, what's going to happen to the next guy that steps into the ring with him? You know what I mean?
And the thing about that is that can go a whole different direction too, because then now you're bringing in the discussion about the effects of poverty. And a lot of times what America does is like to kind of try and hide their head and act like, yeah, we didn't bring these slaves over. We didn't separate the families. We didn't do all this because of all the reactions because of it. So now, again, it's like in one of those kind of reap what you sow kind of situations where now we in the situation where we can actually see what has come of what has been created, if you can follow that jargon line. And again, that's a mega topic again, because but now I will tell you that one of the presentations that I often do, especially for like school districts and different things, is understanding poverty, and a lot of people really don't understand the effects of poverty and what it makes you do. And so, like, say for instance, I work in the Flint schools or whatnot, and without releasing any names or anything, we deal, and I'm dealing with a situation where, just one example, a young lady, the teachers wanted her to just put her purse up. Okay, red purse, ain't nothing special about it. It's old, kind of beat up, but it's hers. But when you're dealing with somebody in poverty, what people in poverty are focused on is possessions and survival. Any attacks to either one of those, you're gonna get an equal and opposite reaction. So when the teachers tried to take that old raggedy purse, she lost it. So when you take somebody who's dealing with impoverished situations and different things, and then you put them in a situation where now they gotta basically show you what has been created, I mean, you can only expect him to act and react in the ways that he's been doing, because that's what he's been conditioned to do.
Exactly. And all that stemmed from his childhood. And he says that in the documentary, that it's
hard to come back from.
With the type of childhood that he had, he's like, what do you expect?
Yeah.
What do you expect from me to do? Right.
Especially when the male figure in his life, his dad, shows no emotion, don't give a about nothing, because of stabbed mom 5 times in front of the family. When mom tried to take him away, shot her in the leg, and I would be willing to put everything I own that wasn't the only 2 incidents.
No, those were just the two highlighted ones. But
Right.
yes, a child knows nothing but violent aggression in his childhood. You know, it's no wonder that it spilled out into his persona in the ring and his personality. You know,
Yeah.
at least while he was wrestling. Now, in 1995, New Jack moved over to ECW and Paul Heyman, right?
Yeah.
And
Bigger venue.
yep, Jim Cornette, which was his the owner of the Smoky Mountain Wrestling, said that the ECW is already filled with wrestlers who went too far.
Yep.
That New Jack had to be the guy who went even farther.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And that's exactly what he did. And like we were talking about before, in 1996, we have the mass transit incident. You know what I mean? Mass transit, also known as Eric Koulas, 17-year-old kid who did some backyard wrestling. Those startup backyard wrestling things or groups that people have.
Roof and
Yep. Wrestling with a guy named Tiny the Terrible, right? Him and his brother. 2-on-1 match with mass transit. And, I guess the ECW had seen this, or Tiny the Terrible was friends with New Jack and pushed for them to come get a shot in the ECW. And Eric Koulas lies about his age. And, he's a 17-year-old kid, tells everybody at ECW he's 21. So they get a shot to go up again, or to go up into ECW and have a match. Now, correct me on the details here, Ray, but New Jack had a match with an individual. I'm forgetting his name, but he backed out at the last minute. He couldn't wrestle, right?
Yeah.
So they went to this kid, Mass Transit, and said, "Hey, we're pulling you up into this match to wrestle against New Jack." And he's like, "Okay." And which made Tiny the Terrible feel slighted. He was like, "Oh, we came to be part of ECW." Now him and his brother, they got left out of the match, and Mass Transit was paired up with a guy you might know, Devon Dudley, right? Who's later from the Dudley Boys, right?
Yep.
And paired this 17-year-old untrained amateur wrestler with Devon Dudley to go against New Jack. And I don't know. It doesn't say who New Jack's partner was at the time. What
Mustafa.
was it? Mustafa?
Yeah.
Dan, hold on, pause right there. Now, knowing what came after that, okay, just in the back of your mind, think about like I don't want to say hazing, but like when the freshman football players get to Nebraska.
Yep.
Those freshmen, if they come in there and they do what they're supposed to do, not disrespectful, hey, it's gonna be a good time. But you can't come in as a freshman telling no senior what you about to do and what they about to do.
Exactly. That's the perfect segue to getting into the details of the match, because if Eric Koulas just shuts up and gets in the ring and wrestles, this isn't even an incident. It's not even talked about, right?
Yep.
But this kid decides to approach New Jack and tell him what he's going to do. And New Jack even says, he's like, this kid tries to come to tell a vet like how the match is going to go down and that he wants to get some offense in and this is what's going to happen. New Jack says, what I'm going to do to this kid, they're going to be talking about for 20 years.
Right.
And he wasn't wrong.
Yeah.
He wasn't wrong.
No.
Because New Jack gets in the ring paired with Devon Dudley and New Jack, and he admits this several times on the documentary. The dude loved him some cocaine, right? Cocaine and vodka before matches. So New Jack is high on cocaine, and this new kid, 17-year-old rookie, approaches him and says, "This is how it's going to go down." He got in the ring, and we're not gonna put the video on the episode, but I'm gonna put the links in the description so people can visit them if they want to. But this is our warning: graphic images. View at your own discretion, because it's not pretty. He gets in the ring, he uses a surgical scalpel and cuts this kid all the way across his forehead.
Save some for
After trying to jab it in there.
Let me give my view on this.
Okay.
Give the whole fucking thing away. Here's the way I view it. I remember reading this, okay, like a long time ago. And I just think it's cool now because I used to read all these incidences in these ECW magazines, and I get to watch them now. Dan pretty much covered everything, okay? You got this 440-pound fat kid, 17 years old, named Eric Koulas, who snuck his way with these two midgets into the locker room somehow, or in the back, snuck his way in there. His father took him to the show, and it was Devon Dudley was supposed to be paired with Johnny Rods that day, and Rods couldn't show up. So he lied about being 21 years old. He lied that Killer Kowalski was his trainer because he said that's who trained him to wrestle. He lied about all his wrestling experience. He snuck his way back in there. This kid knew that there was no rules in this wrestling organization. He knew about all the props. Maybe he didn't know who New Jack was, but I heard that when he was in that locker room, like you guys said, he went up to New Jack and said, I want to do this. I want to put you through a table. I want to hit you with this. And New Jack said, hell no, you ain't doing that. Right. And then he sits in the locker room and he's smoking a cigarette, and he sits right next to Taz. Taz, if you guys know who Taz is, the guy's the most straight person in the world. He doesn't smoke, he doesn't drink, he doesn't do anything. He's just a health nut. He starts smoking a cigarette in the locker room, and right next to Taz. And like Dan said, New Jack basically said, I'm gonna kill this kid when I get out there. So what ended up happening was they went out there, and his dad's in the crowd. He let me see, he hit him with a toaster. He balled up a chain and repeatedly hit him in the head with a chain. Took that surgical scalpel and sliced him from ear to ear, and then picked him up and hit him again, then hit him with a chair. Now his dad, you can hear him from outside saying, "Stop, that's enough. He's 17. He's 17." Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking to myself when I seen that video, like, wait a minute. He wasn't 17. He wasn't 17 when you let him sneak in that locker room.
Yeah.
And that's basically it, man. And he got on top when he was laying there with the paramedics there. He stuck his foot on he had the microphone, put his foot on his stomach. He said, "I hope this fat son of a bitch bleeds to death." He said, "Because I don't give a fuck about this fat motherfucker." I just know what he said. That's not me. Yep. And in my opinion, the way that I view it, you guys may disagree. I personally think the kid got what he deserved, because there's no amount of money where someone like me who's never wrestled before is going to go in there and tell New Jack how the match is going to go on. There's no amount of money where I would do that. Yeah. I think he deserved it. What do you guys think?
He agreed to get in that match. He agreed, and he even told New Jack, he's like, you can cut me. He wanted to get cut. He didn't know to the degree he was going to get cut, but he told New Jack that, all that stuff was talked about. New Jack took it to another level because this kid disrespected him. I mean, 50 stitches this kid had in his head. Never wrestled again. Never, ever wrestled again.
And he didn't get paid for that night either.
I'm not sure the pay was much anyway. Hey, but look, along those lines, what you're talking, hey, I remember my pastor said one little anecdote or story or whatnot. He told us the story about the scorpion and the frog. And the river was rising, okay? And the scorpion needed to get to the other side. So he's begging the frog to take him. The frog like, heck no, you're going to sting me and I'm going to die. I already know. I've seen this before. Scorpion pleads with him. Look, I'm not going to sting you, this, that, and the other. So finally, Scorpion gets on the back of the frog. Frog swims him to the other side of the bank. Boom, Scorpion stings him. Oh. Moral of the story is that's the Scorpion's nature. Yeah. So if you going into a ring knowing you about to face New Jack, and if you expect to not come out of there bleeding, broke, or something, that's his nature. So Dad should have stopped that before he even walked down the aisle. Yeah. To put a 17-year-old in against a man, that was a man. You know what I'm saying?
You could actually say it's more the father's fault than anybody. You know, like, why are you going to let your 17-year-old kid get in the ring with this notorious extreme wrestler? You know what I
My
mean?
dad get in the ring with him.
I would have to think that I don't think the Kulas family, I don't think they knew who New Jack was. I really don't. Because no, I just don't see anybody with a conscience that'll go in there and tell New Jack, I'm going to do this and do that, and yeah, cut me and give me color.
Yeah, but his dad had to know how untrained he was, right? Like his dad had to know you're not a trained wrestler, and you jump in the ring with these professionals. That right there should have been the first step. Whether he knew New Jack's reputation or not, he's untrained. You're letting your 17-year minor son, who's untrained, get in the ring with trained professionals. Like that's your first warning, right? That's the first thing you should have thought about.
Just like how when Ray was on varsity playing football, and what used to happen at the end of the day, every day, at the end of every practice, they would bring freshman and JV football players over there.
Yeah.
And you think Ray let up on any of them? No.
Fuck no.
No.
Fuck no.
Ray
around varsity.
as an 11th grader and 12th grader, Ray tried to put the mugs in the dirt every single time. That's the rite of passage right there.
Yeah.
You know, so for him, like you were saying, Ray, when he put his foot on his stomach, it's like, yeah, I did it. You know, what you expect. This is what you get, man. Hey. Yeah. But remember, in that documentary, at the very beginning, what they say, when they went in the locker room, it was like a family atmosphere.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
If that ain't dysfunctional.
You hear that about all eras of wrestling, right?
Yeah.
Guys that are mutual enemies in the ring are best friends outside of the ring.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, like those kids, you know, when I was on the varsity, those kids that I used to beat mercilessly, they're all my little brothers now. Like I'm, you know, Mike's little brother. Those guys are all my little brother. I care about them. I do anything for them.
Man, it's like a rite of passage. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. You got some other New Jack incidences you want to talk about, Dan? I know you got some written down.
Yeah. So, well, just stemming from that mass transit incident, there's some interesting things. You know, New Jack ended up having to go to court over this, right? He was arrested and booked with assault and ended up in a courtroom in a jury trial. And New Jack was kind of shitting his pants a little bit because it was a 6-person jury, and the jury was made up of 5 white women and 1 80-year-old black man, right? So he was like, I'm fucked, right? There's no way I'm getting out of this.
The guy was falling asleep, you know, through most of the shit.
Right. So they put Paul Heyman on the stand, and they ask him, or they, you know, tell him what happened. And Paul Heyman's like, you know, his dad's calling him the N-word. And I think the lawyer, the judge, you know, asked him to truly say, quote, what he said. And he looks at New Jack and he's like, is it okay? Is it okay if I say this? And he's like, yeah, go ahead. And Paul Heyman says, he called me an N-word, but said the word. And he said, New Jack said, this black man stood up, his eyes popped open, and he's like, okay, you got my attention now. And and he was acquitted of all the charges, and he was let go.
Working. Paul Heyman was working in that courtroom. He was working.
Yeah. Yep. And that's exactly what somebody said in these. Paul Heyman was working the judge, working the lawyers.
Yeah,
he knew what to say.
Now here's one more thing about that. Here's where mass transit had a little bad luck that night, though. Well, other than the other bad luck he had. Now he had mentioned that Killer Kowalski trained him. That was one of the things he lied about.
Yeah.
He said I can't remember who said it. I watched a shoot interview. I think it was Jim Cornette. He said that Killer Kowalski used to attend most ECW events, but he wasn't at this one. Had he been at this one, he could have verified, I don't know this fat fuck.
Right.
He's lying. That could have saved it.
Right.
For some reason, Killer Kowalski wasn't at that particular event.
Yeah. So we'll fast forward to the year 2000 when you know, in ECW, New Jack is going up against Vic Grimes at the time, right? And they had this prearranged match where they're going to get up like 20 feet, 40 feet or so. 40 feet. 40 feet. Yeah, and New Jack is going to flip this Vic Grimes off of this concert scaffolding and down onto this mat below. They get up there. They
had a whole bunch of tables in the ring. Like the whole inside of the ring It was covered with tables, and they were stacked like 5 high all around the ring. He was supposed to land on that.
Are you talking about this one, or are you talking about the revenge match?
The revenge match.
Yeah, I'm talking about the first incident that led to that. Yep. So they were up on the scaffolding. I think that one was 20 feet. They were 20 feet up, and they were supposed to fall down to like the ring entrance where there was some mats laid out, right? Yeah. So they get up there, and they're, he's about to do the move, and New Jack, gets in Vic's ear and is like, "You ready? You ready? Here we go." And Vic chickens out. He's like, "No, man, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this." And chickens out. And through the whole documentary, and if you follow New Jack's career, the one thing everybody says is, you don't piss New Jack off, right? You don't go against what you said you're gonna do, and you don't piss him off. Yeah. Right? You don't disrespect him, I should say.
Exactly.
So New Jack's like, "I'm gonna flip," and he goes. New Jack counts, and this guy hesitates. Vic Grimes hesitates, and causes the trick not to go the right way. And Vic Grimes ends up landed on New Jack's head, and New Jack suffers a fractured skull.
Yeah, and he said he lost vision in his right eye because of that. That's what New Jack said.
It messed him up pretty bad. Now years later, a year or two later, the rematch match that Ray is talking about, they're wrestling again, and this previous incident never left New Jack's mind. He's like, "I'm gonna get this motherfucker." He's
Plus, he was also upset. He said that in the 2 years that he was in recovery or whatever it was, he said Vic Grimes never reached out to him and never.
Yeah, great point, Ray. He did say that. Yeah, he never reached out to him to say he's sorry or what. So again, New Jack is high on coke, out for revenge,
every night,
pissed off.
Yeah.
And he said, I'm gonna kill this motherfucker. So they get up 40 feet on the ring scaffolding or the lighting thing or cage above, and he's got stacked up tables down there. And he had bought a taser, right? He went and he bought a taser the night before, and they get up there, and Vic Grimes didn't know this, and New Jack pulls out this taser and tases him, and then just tosses him, misses the tables completely. They said he was only feet from going out of the ring.
Yeah, couple feet. Yeah,
couple feet from missing the ring completely. So New Jack had no concern about throwing him in the right place. He just wanted to throw him off of there.
What happened, Mike, was the way I described the tables for the second match. Like, they basically had a table. They probably, I don't know, 20 tables maybe inside the ring. And then they had them stacked like 5 high. And like I said, they were 40 feet in the air. Remember back in the days, the NWA used to have the Skywalkers match at Starrcade? They were way higher than that. That's how high these guys were. You guys were way up there. Now Owen Hart, when he died, he was 50 feet in the air when he fell. These guys were only 10 feet lower than that.
Right.
But what happened was, the way Dan was describing his fall, picture like if you were in the ring and like you were on the top rope, and I was like doing this to the top rope, and you're just going up and down. You know how your nuts would hurt? That's the way when Vic Grimes fell, he basically missed all the tables, and that's the way he landed. He bounced up the top on his nuts, did a flip, and he fell, man. Like Dan said, it's only like 2 feet where he
hit the ropes, man.
And luckily for him, they said in that Dark Side of the Ring documentary, luckily for him, he only suffered a shattered ankle. That was it. Yeah, but that was his revenge. He got his revenge on him. He tossed him 40 feet.
Like you said, he was trying to toss him to the arena floor.
Yeah.
He was pissed off that he got caught by the ropes. He was trying to send him on the way down. But then again, like you were saying, Ray, yet and still, it's still not the first time that somebody has been thrown off from 40 feet. I mean, it's new because it's usually not the black heel that's doing it. It's usually, your Rock and Roll Expresses, your Four Horsemen, your Road Warriors. They're usually the ones that's doing it. But now, like I said, when New Jack got into it, he brought a whole new attitude and a real attitude. Just like how you was talking about my man who he sat next to that was smoking or whatever.
Yeah.
Taz.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna call him a fake, but for all intents and purposes, his personality is not real like New Jack's is real. You know what I'm saying? That New Jack is a a-hole just on Tuesday. It don't matter.
Yeah.
That's just him. You know what I'm saying? But then you put that same persona into a ring, give him some barbed wire and scaffolding and say, you know what? Go show me how big a-hole you can be. Man, he gonna outdo everybody.
Now I'm going to play devil's advocate here for just a second. So, like, this is, if you want to think about the other side of the coin with New Jack, the way New Jack handled his business, especially when the way he treated wrestlers and what he did to them, if they pissed him off or didn't do what he said he was going to do.
Yes, I don't revenge.
You know, there's a question of, and if he watches this, I hope he forgives me, but there's a question of professionality there, right? Professionalism, right? You could be pissed off at someone. You go out there and you have an arranged trick or aerial maneuver that you have planned. If you take that opportunity to exact your revenge on someone, to try to hurt them, you know, that could cost someone their life. You know what I mean? If he lands on that turnbuckle or lands on the arena floor, you know, we're talking about another Owen Hart incident where the guy probably doesn't survive, you know? So
now remember, you dealing with somebody who grew up in poverty, who father probably told him, I'm gonna be there to pick you up, just wait. And he sat on the steps many a nights, daddy didn't come.
oh yeah,
I'm gonna get you the Jordans. And then he sat and threw away his Chuck Taylors and now waiting on the Jordans and they never came. So you're dealing with somebody who's systematically been programmed that, okay, I'm about to deal with disappointment. How am I going to deal with it? In the best way that makes me feel better. So
absolutely.
It's a trickle down effect. They just caught what his family been catching or what his dad been dishing out all these years. So it was supposed to happen. It was like how they always talk about it's hard to look away when you see a car crash or a train wreck about to happen.
Yeah.
That's New Jack. You want to see that accident. You want to see the carnage.
It's a perfect example of behavior stemming from his childhood. All he knows is to exact out violence on somebody when you're pissed off. And yes, and I agree. Is what do you expect from the guy? But that's the only thing I'm going to say, like, kind of from that devil's advocate point, is like, you know, you're taking you're risking someone's life. You know, you could be pissed off at someone, but handle it after the ring. You know, fist fight him after the ring. Don't put his life in danger inside the ring. You know, where you're supposed to be a professional.
What was my man name from Cleveland that gave my man did the haymaker to what's the Steelers quarterback?
Mason Rudolph.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly the same thing.
Connected with that helmet, he would have been the New Jack of the NFL.
Yep. And again, this is the second. We'll talk about a couple more, but this is the second example of him doing that, where he's exacting his revenge in the ring, not waiting till after the match to get upset with someone. Or, you know, it would have been a different story if you would have met him in the alley behind the arena and fucked him up because you didn't do what you're going to say you're going to do, or you cracked my skull 2 years back.
But don't miss the genius though. He has acted his revenge in the ring, where everything's legal.
Oh, I understand that, and we'll get to a quote that's going to explain that later a little bit.
If it happened in the alley afterwards, that court case would have been a whole lot different.
Yeah.
In the ring, we got waivers, we got signatures. You know who I am. If me and Ray set to wrestle, and Ray know every week I come to the arena with a chainsaw and I'm just up there chopping off body parts, if he bring his crazy tail up to the ring, hey, expect to lose that arm.
Well, I mean, if me and Mike ever wrestle, basically my job is to make you look good. Your job is to make me look good.
Thank you. Yes, it's a dance.
There's two things I wanted to add here. And yeah, Dan, you brought excellent points on that one. I'm gonna give a quick plug real quick. Mike, you're gonna like this one. Real quickly, my friend Carol Ann, who watches my show, she's a good friend of mine. She's watched all of the D Sweet Nation episodes. Her favorite episode is episode 6, which is your episode.
That's what's up.
cool. She said, I really like that.
Smart.
So that was just my quick shout out to her. But you know, here's what I think. And Dan, yeah, I mean, you know, you brought some good points about the professionalism and all that. But the way that I view it is, I think that when New Jack smells blood, if you even have one iota of inferiority, I think he really goes after you and tries to maim you and hurt you and dig into you. Now there was one particular wrestler, God, I can't remember his name for the life of me, but it was New Jack's, like, one of his retirement matches. He had a hardcore match. It was an old white guy. The guy had a big beard, looked like he was from the bayous of Louisiana. He was skinny. He had no build. He didn't even look like he was tough. But what was different about that match is New Jack was basically giving it to him like he gives it to everybody else, but this guy was giving it back. He dug into New Jack, and he beat the living fuck out of New Jack. New Jack almost bled to death. After the match was over, New Jack needed, you know, a few minutes to catch his breath, and you know, he looked like he couldn't breathe that well. I mean, he was just gushing out with blood. He grabbed the microphone, and he approached the guy, and the you could read the guy's lips. He said, "Hey, man," he said, "it's over, man." He thought that New Jack was going to come at him. He said, "I'm done." And then New Jack said, "I got 2 words for you, you punk motherfucker." And he said, "Thank you." He thanked him. So I think that if you give it back to him and go 100%, dig into him, make him bleed, punish him, like make him feel pain, like the pain you're gonna feel, I think you would earn his respect a little more. But the question is, you got the balls to do it.
Don't get it twisted. New Jack was a professional.
Yes.
He knew what he was doing. Even in the episode of Dark Side of the Ring, he made reference to that fact. I think it was after I forgot what match it was, but he said it was a lot of white people outside waiting on him. I think it was after the Big Boy event. They was outside waiting on him with bricks, calling them names and this, that, and the other. And then his statement was, "That's when I knew that I did my job."
Got him. Yeah, I got him. Yep.
And exactly. Yep. So he's in it purely. I don't want to say purely, but he knows the benefit of selling the entertainment portion of it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But he also knows how to detach and say, okay, that was a great performance by me because look what they doing. Yeah. Now, just think if we went on Broadway and watched Cats, and then we had people waiting outside for the villain of Cats ready to throw bricks because they just made them feel that way. You know, he is selling the mess out of this villain.
Yeah. Now the next match we're going to talk about that's highlighted in the documentary kind of plays into what the comment Ray just made about giving it back to him. And this was a match with Gypsy Joe in 2003, right? This guy was a 72-year-old wrestler, right? And his gimmick was he was impervious to pain, right? So they get in and they start wrestling, and this guy is not showing any sign of being affected by anything New Jack was throwing at him.
He wasn't selling.
Right, it wasn't selling anything, right? He was letting the crowd know this guy's not shit, right? This guy's not playing into his gimmick of being impervious to pain. New Jack, and it doesn't say that he's high on anything, but from his other matches, you just have to assume, right? Yeah. So he takes offense to that. He's like, all right, you ain't going to show any pain. You ain't going to sell nothing. Well, I'm going to beat the living crap out of you.
That's what he did.
And he proceeds. And, you know, it's an empty kind of warehouse type ring. And he throws him out of the ring, pulls out the bat. It begins by being wrapped in barbed wire. New Jack beats the barbed wire right off the bat, beating this guy, throwing chairs on him, you know, and just just beats the snot out of this guy. So like what Ray said, when you come back at him, you know, he respects that. But at the same time, this guy did that, but he didn't want to sell anything. You know, he was out there trying to make New Jack look like a punk, which then flips that New Jack switch, and he goes from wrestling to getting pissed off and just gives this guy a beat.
Which again goes back to the poverty, saving face, can't be made to be embarrassed in front of other people.
Yep.
I mean, that's a powerful stigma to have to overcome, and then to even know that he's still kind of hindered by it yet and still, and he's a 50-year-old man.
Yep.
You know
and I don't know if this is the match you were talking about, Mike, but he said that it was the crowd. It was the crowd or people outside that was yelling, you know, go home N-word, go home N-word.
I think that was, yeah,
right?
that was the match. Yep.
Yep. And yeah, it's just
If you look at
another example.
If you go back and look at some of Gypsy Joe's like old matches from like when he was like really, really young, he had a reputation. Now he was a tough guy, just so you guys know.
Man, he was taking
like when he was in his 30s and 40s, he was an extremely tough guy.
Yeah.
What he used to do is he used to like slap the shit out of people. Remember the way Ronnie Garvin used to slap people in the chest? He slapped harder than him, and he used to slap people in the face all the time.
That was hands of stone.
He used to beat the hell out of people before it was cool. So what I had found out was before New Jack and Gypsy Joe wrestled, when they were back in the locker room, Gypsy Joe said to him, he said, "Oh, so you think you know a little bit about hardcore, huh? I'll show you hardcore." And New Jack entered the ring pissed off, and like Dan said, he probably did a couple of 8 balls before he went out there. And New Jack was working with him for a minute or so, and like Dan said, when he wasn't selling, he just blew a gasket, beat the hell out of him with that bat. I mean, they were like in the 4th row, they were like knocking chairs over. A lady hit New Jack with a purse. He picked up a chair, look, he was almost hit her with it. And it was just, now to Gypsy Joe's credit, I'm gonna give him credit. And this is after getting beat with that bat. He walked off and even looked at New Jack like what the fuck? It ain't like he got carried out. He got hit in the head.
Three.
He got hit in the head with a bat.
3 times.
His head and face look. Have you guys ever seen that movie Cape Fear with Robert De Niro and Nick Nolte?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Remember when the girl poured lighter fluid on him and they burned him?
Yeah.
And remember how his head and face looked? That's what Joe looked like after New Jack beat the hell out of him. But Gypsy Joe
like that Martin episode when he fought Spinks, or
he walked off on his own power, and 73 years old. So I'm gonna give him a little bit of credit for that, man.
Yeah, you have to.
With a bat, and he was hitting him hard in the head with that bat.
But think about I know you, both of y'all. I know y'all been watching Jordan, The Last Dance. That's one of the things with Jordan. A lot of time, I want to say during there every episode, it was something that pissed Jordan off to where he gonna go ahead and bust you for the 63. He gonna bust you for the 50. A lot of his stuff was retaliatory. So I mean, with New Jack doing what he doing in a retaliatory manner as well. I mean.
not quite the same.
Is that what the greats do?
It would have been more like when the Pistons walk up on the Bulls. If Jordan would have grabbed a chair off the bench and walked around beer upside the back of the head, that would have been a better comparison.
Now I'm gonna tell you this. Now that we're on that subject, real quick, I have this page. It's called World Heavyweight Boxing, where they just talk about boxing heavyweights. Mm-hmm. Now, speaking of that documentary where Michael Jordan is talking bad about all these people, Charles Barkley, Isaiah Thomas, slapping Steve Kerr, talking all that shit about people, look this story up when you guys get a chance. In 1988, at Richard Dent's birthday party, Richard Dent played for the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, 95.
At Richard Dent's birthday party, Mike Tyson was there too, and Michael Jordan was there. Iron Mike had a little bit too much to drink. They said that it took, I can't remember how many people, he went at Michael Jordan and wanted to kick his ass. And I had wrote on that article. See, I like Iron Mike. That's my Mike, is Iron Mike. You guys like Jordan. I like Mike. I wish that they'd have let him loose and busted his ass. I'd have liked to see him shatter my jaw. Now, Mike won't talk bad about him in that documentary, I bet.
I can't touch that. My wife.
Let's see
Okay,
to
go
that.
ahead, Dan. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It doesn't make it clear in the documentary, but during that, when that Gypsy Joe match took place, I believe he was wrestling in a lower, kind of not well known wrestling federation, because at the time, WWE wouldn't touch, New Jack. He was new. I think WWE was too mainstream. I don't know. I don't think the ECW and the hardcore stuff had entered into the WWE or WWF at that time. But then, so I think it was, because in 2004 he's wrestling in this Thunder Wrestling Federation. But I don't know if it's the same federation that the Gypsy Joe.
The Gypsy Joe match. I don't know what organization. Like you said, it was a lower organization. I know that was in Columbia, Tennessee.
Looked like a high school.
The Thunder one, is that where we're getting a Hunter Red?
Yes, yeah.
That was in Florida.
Yeah. So I think after the ECW, after he was hurt, he didn't wrestle in the ECW anymore, and he kind of bounced around to a couple smaller organizations just to wrestle. So so in 2004, like Ray said, what's that, Mike?
He probably couldn't get clearance with that skull fracture to wrestle
Right.
ECW. That the insurance people probably was like, you know what?
Right, liability. Yeah. So 2004, he's wrestling in the Thunder Wrestling Federation, and he's going against a guy named Hunter Red, also known as William Jason Lane, right? And another incident where
put another disclaimer on this story. You better tell nobody under 6 or under 13 or whatever watch this video.
Yeah. And again, we're going to put these videos, links to these videos in the description, because we're not going to put them on. But Hunter Red, aka William Lane, comes in the locker room and tries to tell New Jack how things are going to go down, right? And New Jack says, what are you telling me? What are you saying to me? Gets an attitude, and Lane gets an attitude back. It's like, whatever, man, whatever, and walks off. So New Jack had gone, I guess, the day before or a couple days before, whatever, and bought himself a little claw, like kind of like a Wolverine or Freddy Krueger claw, right? And once again, New Jack he says in the documentary, he's high on Coke and vodka, throwing Coke, drinking vodka in the locker room, and they get out there and they're wrestling. Well, Lane is taking it to New Jack pretty hard, pretty serious. Gets him in the ring or gets him in the corner and throws some real actual blows on him, and is going at him quite hard. And it's funny because in the documentary, D'Lo Brown is looking at this video and kind of commentating, right, telling everybody what's going on, and he's like, oh, here, okay, so New Jack's in his ear right now, and they're talking, you're probably telling him like, oh, you're really going at me, okay, this is how it's going to go down. And he got him up with the ropes, and he reaches into his pocket and pulls out this knife that he'd taken off this claw, and just, the only way I can describe it is a prison shanking, right? You see in the movies when the guy walks up to another dude in prison and gives him a good shank. That's how I would describe this. He's got him in it, and he just jabbing him and
piecing him up.
Yep. And throws him out of the ring and gives this guy a beating. And you can see people in the crowd, this woman, outside of the ring, gives him a beating. And this shows this woman, and she's like, just like, what am I watching right now? It was crazy. And, he said somebody called 911 from that match and said, basically didn't say, I'm at a wrestling match and these two wrestlers are, this wrestler is stabbing this other wrestler. He said, a black guy has stabbed a white guy, come help, right? So the cops show up thinking that it's an attempted murder or an assault of some sort, not knowing it's a wrestling match. And once again, New Jack gets arrested. And, he says in the documentary that, the authorities or someone had said, that witnessed that he had stabbed him 16 times, but New Jack said, no, I counted. It was 9 times. So, like the mind of New Jack, no, I counted each one. It was 9 times. When's the last time you heard like a serial killer say, oh, no, Your Honor, I counted. It was only 42 times. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he knew what he was doing. New Jack, And that's what I will give up for a lot of the wrestlers. They are professionals. And granted, with it being New Jack, okay, obviously that blade was only about this long. If he would have came with a 4, 6, 8-inch, okay, yeah, my man would be dead.
Yeah.
But he knew how far he could go. You know, I don't want to call him a surgeon, but he was precise with what he did, not hitting no major arteries. He's a professional.
Yeah.
He didn't like stick him in the neck or in the heart or anything. He sliced him.
It was like in the chest or something. Yeah.
Puncture wounds. You
You
guys
know,
know.
we don't get a lot of blood going, but just enough to sell some more tickets.
Yeah, you could.
Not enough to make so that he can't come to his next match.
You could see in the video the way New Jack was holding the blade. You know, he's holding the blade like this, and only a certain amount of it is exposed. It's not like he's got some big knife, right?
He's just trying to get a little blood,
right? Now, Jim Cornette. I'm trying not to murder this too much. Jim Cornette, talking about that incident, had this quote, and he was talking about cooperation versus felony assault, and he said there's a fine line between cooperation and felonious assault, and sometimes that line is blurred. He said, like, you know, when there's an incident occurring between the wrestlers that they agreed upon, and the things that happen stay within those parameters, you know, that's okay. But once a wrestler goes outside of those parameters and takes it, you know, to an egregious a place outside of those parameters, he's like, that's when the wrestlers cross the line.
And remember, a lot of his stuff was retaliatory.
Yeah.
So it would be the other wrestler taking it upon his own. But and that's like, you know, it's the devil that you know versus the devil you don't know. I mean, if you decide to do it, you know it's consequences.
And that again is another example. You know, I'm going to bring up the devil's advocate thing here again. You know, Hunter Red didn't know that was going to go down. You know, he didn't know New Jack had that knife in his pocket. He didn't know he was going to get cut or stabbed. At least, you know, from the documentary, they didn't talk about that. It was just New Jack lost his cool and decided that that's how he was going to retaliate in that moment.
You know what kept him out of prison? Do you guys know why that New Jack's not in prison?
Yes, I was actually going to say that. I think I got it right. So you want to go ahead?
This is what New Jack said, because I watch shoot interviews all the time. This is New Jack's version. He said when he was in jail, he said Hunter Red went up to the jail to visit him. He said, what the fuck you doing here? He said, listen, man, he said, I'm going to make a deal with you. He said, I'll drop the charges if you train me. And New Jack said, done. He said, but can I also go on the road with you too? He said, done. He said, I'll drop the charges. He said, okay. They went to court. Hunter Red dropped the charges. New Jack packed up and got the hell out of Dodge. Never been back in Tampa since.
Oh, see, so now the documentary says that same thing, but he said Hunter Red didn't say, not the training part. Hunter Red wanted it to be a gimmick. He wanted them to go on the road and turn it into a gimmick that Hunter Red was on the trail of New Jack hunting him down. You know what I mean?
They wanted the storyline out of that.
Yeah, they wanted to go on the road and turn it into a gimmick. And he said, like Ray said, Hunter Red dropped the charges and New Jack bolted from Florida. It was never to be seen again.
I mean, at some point, I hate to say it like this, but at some point the exploitation has to stop. Because once you get to the point where now I actually got to go to court. Now, my bosses and everybody done told me, hey, this is what we want you to get out there. I'm paying you every time you cut somebody, every time we see blood, and I'm endorsing you and I'm telling you this. And now I did what you asked me to do, boss. Now you got me in court. Okay, now and then after that, now I done did what you asked me to do. Now I'm in jail. So it's like, okay, and now I need to use my faculties about me to get myself out of this situation. So like I say, for that, it's like he just got to the point where he was like, you know what, no more. You're not using it anymore.
Yep. And after that match, New Jack goes in to describe, you know, after that match, his mother calling him, you know, and he said he didn't talk to his mom much. His mom really didn't support him a whole lot. And his mom called him and basically says, what are you doing? Why would you do this to that man, you know? And he got pissed off at her. And he's like, he called her the B word. And he said, listen, most moms, you know, I got action figures of me in toy stores. You know what I mean? Most moms would be proud of that and brag to their friends and say, oh, my son's a wrestler and he's got these, you know, action figures and all this and that. And the only contact that, you know, his mother happened to, or to bother to reach out to him for, to tell him he shouldn't have done that. You know what I mean? Not being supportive, but just basically like in shock of what he had done.
New Jack,
He doesn't have any respect for his mother.
he doesn't. Well, he doesn't have a good. He's never had a good relationship with his mother. They've never gotten along. And he even said one time in a shoot interview that that there's been, you know, he kind of wishes that it would have been her that died instead of his dad. He said that before. He doesn't like his mother. I don't know why. I don't want to get into that, but he doesn't really like his mother a whole lot. So that doesn't surprise me.
We talk about that all week.
Yeah, there's a lot of psychological conversations that could be had there. You know, maybe he didn't respect his mom for all the time that she allowed her father's behavior to happen, and you know, but you can't blame her for that too. But yeah, he's like, well, you remember my childhood? He's like, what do you expect me to do?
Yeah. And he might have been looking to her to kind of stand up to dad, because he was probably scared of dad, as well as if he had any other sibling. And she was the only barrier in between, because you understand, if he, I'm sure he's older than me. And when I was younger, they gave out spankings like they did ice cream. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And depending on who your parent was, would depend on the elevation of the spanking. You know, you would have some parents who would just pop the hand. You'll have some parents say, go get me that off the tree. Then you would have some parents that have bought a fist up. Yeah. So with him and dealing with mom, it was hard for him probably to gain respect, because he didn't see her as strong, because she was constantly being broken down in front of him. So he couldn't build, not only could he build respect for her, he couldn't build love for her, because that father figure is showing him that you don't love that. And the biggest thing about that is, you don't, if you love somebody or something, you're not gonna shoot it, you're not gonna stab it. You know what I'm saying? So again, going back, just down back through the lineage, he was destined, he was built to be the kind of person he is today.
I agree.
The end of this documentary, probably one of my favorite parts of the whole documentary, just the way that it ends. And if you guys have seen it, you probably know what I'm talking about. But as I'm watching this, when we get to the end of this documentary, the first thing I think of is like, man, they need to make a movie out of this. You know what I mean? Yeah. There needs to be a Netflix movie made about New Jack, where somebody plays New Jack and just goes through his whole life and career. You know what I mean? And the last thing of this documentary is they asked New Jack, he's like, if there was a movie about your life, he's like, how do you want the movie to end? And he said, oh, me sitting in a wheelchair, getting high on coke, and saying, thank you, bitches, with a middle finger, giving people the middle finger.
I can see that.
It's like, how do you want the movie to end? You know, sitting in a wheelchair, getting high on coke, saying, thank you, bitches, and flipping the bird. And I thought that was hilarious.
I don't know if I've seen that at the end of the documentary. That's interesting.
It's the last thing you see in the documentary, and then it ends. But yeah, they straight up ask him, how, if your life was a movie, how would you want it to end?
And now we can flip again back to The Last Dance. Remember what who was that? Ewing told Jordan that he want to be carried off the court when he was done.
Yep.
And what Jordan tell him? He was like, man, I want to walk off the court. You know what I'm saying? Right. So again, that dichotomy, you know what I'm saying, where he sees his future as being broke down, but still abusing substances instead of upstanding, walking around, making a positive difference in society, because he wasn't that's not what he was ever presented.
Right.
Here's a fun, I'm gonna go like more to the light side of New Jack here. Something I heard him say, because like I said, guys, I watch a lot of shoot interviews. Mm-hmm. He said that you know, he's basically the kind of guy, and I know you guys will believe this, When you tell him to do something, he's going to do the opposite. Or if you tell him not to do something, he's going to do it 100% of the time. When he was in ECW, him and I can't remember the other guys, they had got a recommendation for almost like a tryout for the WWE. Mm-hmm. He said he went to the WWE facility, and Dean Malenko told New Jack, he said, New Jack, all you got to do is, he said, whatever you do, he said, don't look at Vince McMahon in his eyes and don't say a word to him, because we really don't talk to him. And if you were to talk to him, that's going to blow your chances of probably making the roster. And he was like, for real? He was like, all right, whatever, man. He said, I seen Vince in the hallway. He said, I went right up to him. Hey, Vince, how you doing, man? How's the family? You doing good, buddy? All right, talk to you later. Smacked him on the butt. He said, Vince McMahon looked at him like, what the fuck? He said when he looked at the sheet on the wall, they erased New Jack's name off of the roster because of that. I thought that was funny when I heard that. He went right up to Vince. Hey, buddy, how you doing? Doing on the
butt. probably very different than working with Jim Cornette and Paul Heyman, right?
Yeah.
The exact opposite.
From a small venue where you can get away with certain things to major multi-million, where it's like your CEO, like you say, you don't touch the CEO. You don't speak to him. You don't look him in the eyes. If you're not a board member, you have no interaction.
Yeah.
Hey, but I want to get back to what you was talking about earlier, right? When you was talking about how, if you tell him to do something, he going to do the opposite. Mm-hmm. Again, I got to fall back on my behavior specialist experience. I mean, what that's describing is ODD, which is oppositional defiance disorder. And you know how many adults have gone through, and I hate to say especially in Flint, but so many people have gone through elementary, grade school, middle school, high school, and did not get a diagnosis, which means their underlying issues have not been addressed. So when you talk about, somebody just describing their behaviors, somebody like New Jack, any psychologist would tell you right now, this person is ODD. And there's certain ways that you deal with people who have certain disorders. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. You can't come to a cow and speak horse language. You know what I'm saying? That might not fit, but I think you kind of get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
But it's that disorder.
Now we didn't touch on him much, but we'll take a second to talk about New Jack's tag team partner, Mustafa. Right? When they created this tag team, I don't think you could have picked a better tag team partner, at least in personality.
Was he crazy for real? Was he off for real?
This guy, yes, I think so. And it says in the documentary, they even say that the Mustafa.
He said that's real stuff.
Yeah, I think it was this guy named Sandman on the documentary that said, when you see Sandman in them promos, that's how he was all the time, in the ring, outside of the ring. That's how he was. He was just those eye movements that he would make and like picking his nose on the camera. And they said the dude used to roll up pencil shavings in a blunt
with grass and from outside
and smoke it. That stuff is toxic. So this dude was legit crazy, and messed up in the head. You know what I mean? This dude was and he was a big dude too. Yeah. So big and crazy is not a combination I want to get in the ring with. You know what I mean?
No, yeah.
I just can't help but wonder, like people like that, who was basically working in their favor? Did they have an agent or anything? Because what it's looking like, I mean, just with the story of New Jack, the story of a lot of wrestlers, just pure exploitation. If I was to take and gather up everybody in the schools who have certain disorders and weren't able to necessarily think and move and make the right decisions for themselves, and then go ahead and put them on display, it's a little twisted.
Yeah.
It's capitalism at its best.
I don't know for a fact, and maybe Ray can speak to this, but in the documentary, it certainly doesn't show or lead to the fact that they had an agent of any kind.
Yeah.
New Jack seemed like a mad genius. You know what I mean? He knew the things to do to get people's attention.
Smart. Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's smarter than the average bear. You know, he knew what he was doing, and it was a genius. So the ploys and the tactics that he took, because like we said, you know, where he got his beginning, you know, he's in the middle of redneck country, and he's just playing up to the whole race thing. You know what I mean? Just playing right into it.
Almost as genius, and just slight change of gears, but almost as genius as The Rock. The Rock, once he figured out his niche, I mean, the world opened up to him.
Yeah.
And once he gave him the eyebrow and asked him if they can smell what he cooking and really figured out who he was.
Yeah.
It wasn't no wrong that he could do.
Yeah, there's a lot of wrestlers all the great ones that you can think of do that exact same thing. Whether it's Hulk Hogan, The Rock, Stone Cold, Triple H, Shawn Michaels. Once they found that niche, that you know their personas took off and became iconic.
The agent thing, as far as like the agents go, I don't think that he had any agents back then. But the only thing that I do know, because I heard New Jack say this. He said this on a Kayfabe Commentaries podcast. The host had asked him, he said, who covers all these court costs when you get in trouble all the time? When he was in ECW, every time he got in trouble, Paul E. covered all the court costs. And Jim Cornette covered all his court costs when he was in Smoky Mountain.
Oh, yeah, because he's paying the bills.
Yeah.
Jack is paying the bills.
And everybody paid.
Yeah. Now I don't know. You guys tell me about this if this has ever happened. But when I think of New Jack, I immediately say I had loved to see a New Jack versus say like Cactus Jack, aka Mankind.
Jim Duggan. Yeah.
You know what I mean? I would well, not so much Jim Duggan, but Mankind, Cactus Jack. I would have loved to see an extreme wrestling match between the two of those guys. Because you know, Cactus Jack,
for hours.
aka Mankind, that dude was crazy.
Just pure fighting.
Yeah,
I thought of that too. Have you guys ever heard of the Sheik?
Iron Sheik?
No, not the Iron Sheik, but like during the 70s, when they had the territories back then, there was the original Sheik.
No.
You ever heard of the Sheik?
I don't know.
Okay, well he was from Michigan. He was kind of, he didn't have a lot of wrestling ability, but he used to like kind of like do what New Jack did. He used to make people bleed, cut people up. He even had a ring. He used to wear a ring that used to shoot fire out. He used to burn people with these guys. And Mike, did you watch ECW back in the day?
A little bit, yeah.
You know who Sabu is?
You say who?
Sabu.
I've heard that name.
Real big.
No, he was a little guy. He was Rob Van Dam's tag team partner. But anyways, the Sheik is his uncle. The Sheik is his real life uncle. The Sheik wrestled like back in the days when, like, if you ever hear them old, like you're like if you have uncles or like old guys that knew who like Bobo Brazil was, Bobo Brazil, Leaping Larry, Shane, you know, the old IMA, when they talk about the old IMA days when wrestling used to come to Michigan back in the 40s and 50s. Well, the Sheik in the Sheik, not the Iron Sheik, but the Sheik, he had a reputation of hurting guys and cutting guys. And he was also feared that if you crossed him the wrong way, that he's the type of person that would like kill a person. Like you feared that he would like kill you, whether it be in the locker room or whatever, because he was just a nut. His name was the Sheik. So I would like to see New Jack versus the Sheik, not the Sheik at 75 years old like Gypsy Joe was. I'm talking about 45 years old.
Yeah.
I would have liked to see how that match would have turned out, because he used to have that ring to shoot fire out. He used to burn people in the face and cut people, like blood gushing out, where you could like see the blood like a fire hydrant. He used to like, people were scared of him. The fans were scared of him. The other wrestlers were afraid of him. He had respect like no one else. So my dream matchup would have been New Jack versus the original Sheik. That's my matchup.
Okay. I don't know when. What year do you guys think it was, or no? Like, what year did some of that extreme wrestling stuff start to creep into the WWF?
It was like around
80.
I want to say like 1990.
It was earlier than 90s because we had that. Remember, IMA came. The WWF had that big screen at the IMA with Bundy, Hogan.
You're talking about WrestleMania 2, the closed circuit.
Yeah, that was like 84, wasn't it?
86. That one was 1986.
Okay.
Dan, are you talking about like when did the hardcore ECW wrestling like come onto the scene?
Well, not ECW, but like, and correct me if there's somebody else, but my memory is Mankind. You know, when Mankind started to wrestle in the WWF or WWE, you know, when was that? Because I think as far as my memory goes, I think that's when some of that ECW type of wrestlers started to get brought into the WWE and allowed them to do some of that stuff like Mankind did in the ring.
Don't forget about NWA. All right, because they did a lot of that stuff. And again, that was with the Road Warriors, all them with the Spikes and the Four Horsemen. In the NWA with Barry Windham, all them guys, that was the little brother to WWF before it turned into WWE. Yeah. So like NWA, that's you know, you had your Ric Flairs, Tully Blanchard, Arn Andersons, all of them were in there, but like I say, it was like almost second tier, but they were more violent, and that's where a lot of that blood and gore and stuff started happening. And then after some of them start transferring into WWF, that's when WWF started eventually WWE started incorporating a little bit more of the blood and gore and stuff like that. But they were, you know, having, y'all remember the cage matches when they would take somebody's face and rub it across the cage?
Yeah.
I mean,
that was back in the day. They all had blonde hair. Like all the wrestlers in NWA, they all had blonde hair. You can see the blood better. There's another wrestling organization back in the 80s. It was in Japan called the IWGP.
Yeah.
And they were known, and that wasn't televised, they were known for their, you know, hardcore bleeding, this and that. And a lot of wrestlers from the United States would get sent to Japan to get toughened up. Then they would bring them back. But it was like probably like the early 90s when Mick Foley and Terry Funk kind of brought the hardcore. And they wasn't, when they brought hardcore, they wasn't really like doing things to people. They were allowing you to do things to them, whether it's throwing them off something, hitting them with something.
Terry and his brother Dory.
And Dory Funk Jr. too, also, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can credit the NWA in the 80s, and I would say the IWGP in Japan.
But in those days, still, it wasn't quite the level of what New Jack and the ECW were doing, correct? It was more like ladders and throwing through tables and chairs and stuff like that, right?
They were doing that in Japan. They didn't televise it. You never see
it. Was still bloody. Yeah.
But no, I'm saying when it came into the WWE, it was more kind of like the lighter side of extreme wrestling, right? With just tables and chairs and ladders.
Yeah, they didn't believe in all that gore and stuff.
Yeah.
So I would have to say, to answer Dan's question, I would probably say like the mid-1990s is when they really started doing that. And then ECW, Paulie founded that organization, and they used to televise their shows late at night because they didn't want kids watching.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Or Saturday night main event. They used to come on 10 or
So it's probably safe to say if New Jack doesn't suffer that injury in the Vic Grimes incident, you know, he may have ended up in the NWA or WCW or WWE at some point, right?
Yeah. Well, had he not patted Vince McMahon in the ass, we might have seen him in WWE for a minute.
Yeah, I think that plays more to Vince McMahon's personality than New Jack making a mistake, you know?
Yeah, and it's kind of hard for that personality to transfer. Like I said, I don't know. I think I mentioned in episode 6 about Fernando Smith.
Mm-hmm.
That honestly, to me, he's my original New Jack. He's the first person that I seen that truly had the I don't give a crap attitude. And this was when he was in high school. So, I mean, I've seen the attitude early. You know, the attitude has been there. I don't think that New Jack in WWE, if he kept that same attitude. Now, if he was able to separate business and other things, and able to go in there and negotiate and do his thing. But then after he get out the meeting, now I'm transforming back to New Jack. But I think he would go in that meeting with Vince with a barbed wired bat trying to get a contract. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's not gonna work.
Interesting.
All right. Well, we're gonna wrap it up here in a couple of minutes, but New Jack now, and this plays into something Ray said earlier. I know, Ray follows him on Facebook. I've had a peek at New Jack's page on Facebook, and he seems to be very, very interactive with his fans and very appreciative of his celebrity, even to this day. And very appreciative. So it seems like New Jack is now, turned off that inner ring New Jack personality and just kind of laid back in retirement and very fan friendly and appreciative of fan support. And from what Ray says, and you can speak to this, Ray, very interactive with his fans on social media.
He's more interactive than like your average like athlete or ex-pro athlete. He's more than they are.
Okay.
I've engaged with him a few times, so I can definitely verify that he does interact sometimes. He does a lot of live videos sometimes where he's just laying on the couch talking to the people. He does respond to a lot of people. So
Okay.
he's very friendly. Despite everything we covered today, I don't think he's heartless like you might think he is. He has a nice
point right there.
cook. I learned that he's a good cook because he cooks a lot.
Mm-hmm.
He loves his kids. And, like you said, he's kind of toned it down now. He's living the retired life. He has a nice home in Atlanta. He's doing good. And there's a good side to him.
Yeah. And that, one of the things that I try and instill, that I work with kids, across the city or whatnot. But one of the main things I like to try and get them to understand is before you leave high school, you need to figure out a way to make yourself marketable. Okay. Now, if your experiences like New Jack has made you marketable to this certain audience, like you say, Ray, he's probably a great guy. Well, I don't want to say great, but he's probably a decent individual to, shoot the breeze with, whatever. But yeah, but you put a contract in his face and you say, I'm gonna pay you this to go do this. Okay, I'm going to work. Like my wife, she's still working in the pharmacy at Walmart. She has to go to work. When they ask her to come in and perform your daily duties, this is what I expect when you come to work. So I think now, and again, at work, she might be a totally kind of different person. But again, like with New Jack, now that you coming home and you off the clock, of course, now you can connect with your fans. Hey, man, I don't want to say it was all an act because, those were some real feelings, especially like in the retaliatory kind of situations. But yet and still, those are real feelings being added to somebody who has been dealing with an impoverished situation, who have been put in a situation where somebody says, this is okay, which now reverses. So now you can do what you want to do and inciting all the reactions that you're getting. So now that you're retired, you can sit back and finally be yourself.
Good point.
It's a crazy game.
Great point. Well, that's gonna wrap up this episode. Mike, we sure appreciate you being on with us again.
Man, I love you guys, man. Anytime.
We appreciate it. Shout out to New Jack. If he happens to see this episode, we hope that he appreciates what we did and doesn't hold anything we say against us too badly. Right?
And if you ever want to come to Flint, man, everything on me. Come kick it with your boy, man. I love to kick it with you here in the city.
All right, guys. Well, we're gonna sign off right now for Ray and Mike and myself. We appreciate you watching, and we'll see you next time.